The wedding cake hit the floor before anyone could scream. I walked down the aisle of St. Mary's Chapel, my dress shoes echoing off the stone walls like bangs. Every head turned, every mouth opened. The organist's fingers froze mid-chord. My brother Alex stood at the altar in his pressed tuxedo, face white as his boutonniere. His bride-to-be, Sarah, clutched her bouquet with trembling hands. The pastor cleared his throat, confused. I reached the altar and placed a manila envelope on the communion table. "Ladies and gentlemen," I announced, my voice carrying to the back pews where my parents sat frozen. "Before we celebrate this union, I think you should see what kind of woman my brother is marrying." I opened the envelope. 8 by 10 glossy photographs spilled across the white linen. Sarah, my wife Lila, without clothes, tangled, in my guest cabin. Sarah's bouquet hit the floor. Someone gasped. A woman in the third row started crying. "The soundproofing in my house isn't very good," I said, looking directly at Alex. "But I heard everything." I turned and walked back down the aisle. Behind me, chaos erupted. Shouting, running footsteps, the pastor calling for calm. I didn't look back. My name is Brent Mallory, 47 years old. Acoustic engineer for the Department of Defense. No criminal record, model citizen. That was 2 years ago, before I learned what betrayal really meant, before I discovered how far a man will go when his entire world burns down around him. This is the story of how I became the monster they created 2 years earlier. The first lie was small, like they always are. "I have to work late tonight," Lila said, not looking up from her laptop. She sat at our kitchen table, her real estate appraisal spread out like poker cards. Her blonde hair caught the overhead light, same as it had for 23 years of marriage. "Again?" I asked, setting my coffee mug in the sink. "That's the third time this week. The market's hot right now, Brent. You know that?" I kissed the top of her head. She smelled like vanilla perfume and lies, but I didn't know it yet. "Don't work too hard. Madeline's got that school play tomorrow." "I'll be there," she said. She wasn't. I sat alone in the auditorium watching our 17-year-old daughter perform Lady Macbeth, her voice strong and clear as she delivered the sleepwalking scene. The empty seat beside me felt like a wound. After the show, Madeline found me by the exit. "Where's Mom?" "Working," I said. Her green eyes, Lila's eyes, flickered with something I couldn't read. "She's been working a lot lately." That night, I waited up. Lila came home at 1:47 a.m. I know because I was watching the clock, lying in bed, listening for her car in the driveway. She slipped into bed quietly, thinking I was asleep. "How was work?" I whispered. She jumped. "Jesus, Brent, you scared me." "Long meeting. Client dinner, the Hendersons. They're buying the Morrison property." She rolled away from me. "I'm exhausted." The next morning, I called the Hendersons. They'd never heard of any dinner. That's when I started paying attention. I work in sound. It's my specialty. I design acoustic systems for military installations, places where conversations can eliminate if they're overheard. I know how sound travels, how it bounces, how it hides. I started installing recording equipment in our house. Not because I wanted to, because I had to know. The first recording was innocent. Lila on the phone with her sister complaining about her mother's arthritis. Normal stuff. The second recording changed everything. "I can't keep doing this," Lila's voice crystal clear through my headphones. I was in my workshop, listening to yesterday's audio from the living room. "You have to." A man's voice. Familiar, but I couldn't place it. "We're too close to stop now." He's getting suspicious. Yesterday, he asked about the Henderson dinner. What did you tell him? That it was a client meeting, but he called them, Alex. He actually called them. My blood turned to ice water. "Alex, my brother Alex. He doesn't know anything," Alex's voice continued. "He's just being paranoid. You don't understand. Brent's not stupid. He builds security systems for the government. If he starts digging, then we finish this faster. The trust fund paperwork goes through next month. Once we're married and you're pregnant, it won't matter what he knows." Pregnant. I yanked off the headphones and vomited into my workshop sink. My wife, my brother, planning to have a child together and pass it off as mine to secure the family inheritance. I played the recording 17 times before I accepted it was real. That weekend, I told Lila I was going fishing. Instead, I drove to Alex's house, the house I'd helped him buy with a loan I'd co-signed 3 years earlier. I parked across the street and waited. At 2:30 p.m., Lila's white BMW pulled into his driveway. They didn't come out for 4 hours. I took pictures through a telephoto lens. I recorded their conversation when they finally emerged, using a directional microphone from my work kit. "The wedding's in 6 weeks. Alex said, walking her to her car. Think you can handle 6 more weeks? I've handled 23 years, Lila replied. 6 weeks is nothing. They kissed, long and deep, like lovers do, like we used to do. I drove home and sat in my driveway for an hour, staring at our house. The house where we'd raised Madeline, where we'd planned to grow old together, where I'd been living a lie for God knows how long. That night at dinner, Lila announced she needed to visit her sick aunt in Sacramento. How long? I asked. Just the weekend. You and Madeline can have father-daughter time. Madeline looked up from her mashed potatoes. Aunt Carol's sick? Nothing serious, Lila said quickly. Just needs some help around the house. Lila didn't have an Aunt Carol. I excused myself and went to my workshop. I had equipment to install. By the time Lila left for her fake trip to Sacramento, every room in our house was wired for sound. Motion-activated cameras in the common areas. GPS tracker on her car hidden in the wheel well. I was becoming someone I didn't recognize, but I had to know the truth. Lila spent that weekend at Alex's house. The GPS confirmed it. The cameras I'd placed outside his home confirmed it. The directional microphone I'd planted in his bedroom window confirmed what they were doing. Sunday night, she came home with a story about helping Carol organize her medicine cabinet. She even brought a small potted plant as evidence of her charity. Carol gave me this, she said, setting it on our kitchen windowsill. A thank you gift. I nodded and smiled and kissed her cheek. That was nice of her. That night, I lay awake listening to my wife sleep beside me. Her breathing soft and regular. 23 years of marriage. A teenage daughter who worshipped her mother. A life that looked perfect from the outside. All of it built on lies. I started planning that night. Not revenge, not yet, just documentation, evidence, proof of what was happening to my life. I didn't know I was creating the blueprint for their destruction. The pregnancy test fell out of Lila's purse on a Tuesday morning. She was in the shower. I was looking for car keys and saw the small plastic stick wrapped in tissue paper tucked behind her wallet. 2 pink lines. Positive. I sat on our bed, holding the test, doing math in my head. We hadn't had sex in 6 weeks. She'd been pulling away, claiming stress from work, headaches, exhaustion. But she'd been with Alex 3 times that I knew of, probably more. The shower shut off. I wrapped the test back in tissue and returned it to her purse. Find your keys? Lila called from the bathroom. Yeah, I said. Found everything I was looking for. That afternoon, I called my old college friend Victor Tolan. Vic was a lawyer now, specialized in family law. We'd played football together at Oregon State, back when the world made sense. Brent! His voice boomed through the phone. What's it been, 2 years? How's the family? That's actually why I'm calling, Vic. I need legal advice. His tone shifted immediately. Professional, careful. What kind of advice? Hypothetically, I said, if a man discovered his wife was having an affair and planning to pass off another man's child as his own, what would his options be? Silence on the other end. Jesus, Brent. Are we talking about you? Hypothetically. Okay. Hypothetically, that man would need proof, DNA tests, documentation, and he'd need to move fast before any paternity is legally established. What kind of proof? Audio recordings, if they're legal in your state. Oregon's a one-party consent state, so if you're present for the conversation, you can record it. Video evidence, financial records showing deception, bank statements, credit cards, that sort of thing. I was already taking notes. One more thing, Vic, still hypothetically. What happens to existing assets? House, retirement accounts, custody? Depends on how good your lawyer is, he said, and how bad you want to win. That night, I upgraded my surveillance system. I spent the next 2 weeks gathering evidence like I was building a case against enemy agents. Audio recordings of phone calls, video of secret meetings, financial records showing unexplained expenses, hotels, restaurants, jewelry I'd never seen Lila wear. I tracked her GPS movements and created a timeline. Every lie matched with a location. Every work meeting lined up with time spent at Alex's house. The pattern was clear, methodical. They'd been planning this for months, but I still needed the smoking tool. I got it on a Thursday night in October. I was working late in my shop, monitoring the audio feeds from the house, when I heard Lila's car in the driveway. Earlier than expected, she wasn't supposed to be home until midnight. I switched to the living room camera feed and watched her enter with someone behind her. Alex. My little brother, 5 years younger, 6 inches shorter. Everything I'd protected growing up. School counselor, respected member of the community, engaged to a teacher named Sarah. They were in my living room, on my couch, hands all over each other. Are you sure Brent won't be back? Alex asked, his voice clear through my headphones. He's working on some government project. Won't be home for hours. They moved to the guest cabin, the small building behind our house that I'd converted into a studio for Madeline's art projects. I'd wired it too. What I recorded that night would have been enough for any divorce court in America. But I kept recording every sick, twisted detail of their betrayal. They talked about the wedding. Alex's wedding to Sarah, scheduled for next month. Just 6 more weeks, Lila whispered. Then we can be together properly. What about the baby? Brent will never know. Men are stupid about that stuff. He'll think it's his. And the inheritance? Dad's already changing his will. With you married and me pregnant with his grandchild, you'll get the business and the property. Brent gets nothing. I learned that night about the family money I'd never known existed. My father, Conrad, retired Navy acoustics officer, had been investing our military contracts for 30 years. Real estate, technology patents, defense contracts, millions of dollars, all going to Alex, with Lila as the power behind the throne. I sat in my workshop until dawn, listening to them plan my destruction. At 6 a.m., they finally left. Alex through the back gate, Lila into the house to shower off the evidence. I made copies of everything. Digital backups stored in 3 separate locations. Physical copies in a safety deposit box at a different bank than where Lila and I kept our joint accounts. Then I started planning their funeral. Not literal end, something worse. Complete annihilation of everything they thought they were. Cassie Brandt looked like she could eliminate you with a stapler. Mid-30s, auburn hair pulled back in a tactical ponytail, shoulders that suggested serious gym time. She wore jeans and a black t-shirt, but I could see the outline of a concealed carry holster under her jacket. We met at a diner outside Portland, the kind of place where truckers ate bad coffee and nobody asked questions. You Victor Tolan's friend? She asked, sliding into the booth across from me. That's right. You're the private investigator he recommended? Among other things. She studied me like I was a potential threat. Vic says you need background work done, surveillance, maybe some digital forensics. Something like that. Before we talk details, I need to know what we're dealing with. Divorce case? Infidelity. Fraud. Conspiracy to commit paternity fraud. Her eyebrows rose slightly. Busy people. Anyone I should worry about? Connected families, law enforcement, politicians. School counselor and a real estate appraiser. Amateurs. She leaned back. That's almost disappointing. What do you need? I slid a folder across the table. Complete financial workup on both subjects. Bank records, credit reports, hidden accounts, cell phone data, social media analysis, travel patterns. She flipped through the photos and basic information I'd compiled. This your wife? Soon-to-be ex-wife. And the guy? My brother. Cassie's expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes. Professional interest, maybe? Or recognition of a fellow hunter. Family's always messier, she said. What's your timeline? They're getting married in 4 weeks. I want everything before then. My rate is $200 a day plus expenses. Cash only. No questions asked about methods. Methods? Let's just say I have sources in places most PIs don't. I pushed an envelope across the table. There's $3,000. Get me what I need. She pocketed the money without counting it. What aren't you telling me? What do you mean? Most guys in your situation want photos for divorce court. Quick and clean. You're asking for financial forensics and communication analysis. That's hunting behavior, not gathering evidence. She was right. I was hunting. I want to know everything, I said. Every secret, every lie, every weakness. Planning something specific? Justice? Cassie smiled for the first time since sitting down. It wasn't a pleasant expression. My kind of client. I'll be in touch. She called 3 days later. We need to meet. Somewhere private. I suggested my workshop. It was soundproof, isolated, and I knew it wasn't bugged. Cassie arrived at 8 p.m. with a laptop bag and a look that said she'd found something interesting. Your brother's dirty, she said without preamble. School counselor position gives him access to student records, including social security numbers and family financial information. She opened her laptop and showed me bank statements. Alex Mallory has 3 accounts you probably don't know about. 2 in Portland, 1 in Seattle. Total balance of about $60,000. Where did he get $60,000? That's where it gets interesting. Remember how he has access to student records? Well, some of those students qualify for federal education grants, Pell grants, specifically. I stared at the screen. He's stealing from students? creating fake applications using real student information, then directing the money to accounts he controls. It's actually pretty clever. The amounts are small enough to avoid automatic audits, and the paperwork disappears into the federal bureaucracy. How long has this been going on? At least 2 years, maybe longer. 2 years, right around when his relationship with Lila started. There's more, Cassie continued. Your wife's been helping. Some of the fraudulent applications list properties she's appraised as student addresses, places where nobody actually lives. She showed me more documents. Rental properties owned by shell companies, all appraised by Lila, all listed as addresses for students who'd never seen the buildings. They're partners, I said, in more ways than one. Look at this. She pulled up credit card statements, expensive restaurants, hotels, jewelry purchases, all charged to accounts in Alex's name, but the signatures were Lila's. She's been using his credit for 2 years. That's identity theft on top of everything else. What about the pregnancy? Cassie's expression darkened. That's where it gets ugly. I accessed medical records. Don't ask how. Your wife is definitely pregnant. 8 weeks along. The math worked. 8 weeks ago, I'd been in Seattle for a week-long training seminar. Lila had stayed home, claiming she needed to work on a big appraisal project. There's something else, Cassie said, about your family money. What about it? Your father's been consulting with an estate lawyer. The will's being changed, but not the way your wife thinks. She showed me legal documents that must have cost her significant effort to obtain. Your dad knows about the affair. My blood stopped moving. What? Conrad Mallory hired a different private investigator 6 months ago. He's got photos, recordings, the whole package. He knows exactly what's happening. Then why hasn't he said anything? Because he's using it. The new will cuts Alex out completely. Everything goes to you, with a clause that voids the inheritance if you're found to be complicit in any fraud or criminal activity. I stared at the documents, trying to understand. Your father's testing you, Cassie said. He wants to see what you'll do with the information, how you'll handle the betrayal. Jesus. It gets better. The lawyer handling the will change? He's also representing Sarah, your brother's fiancée. Seems she's been having doubts about marrying Alex. What kind of doubts? Cassie smiled that carnivory smile again. The kind that come with photographs of your fiancé screwing his brother's wife. The room spun around me. This wasn't just infidelity anymore. It was a complex web of fraud, manipulation, and family politics that went back months. Who sent Sarah the photos? Anonymous email, untraceable. But the photos came from someone with professional surveillance equipment. My father. The old Navy man was playing chess while the rest of us were playing checkers. What do you want me to do with all this? Cassie asked. I looked at the evidence spread across my workbench. Bank fraud, identity theft, infidelity, conspiracy. Enough to destroy both Lila and Alex completely, but not enough to destroy them the way they'd tried to destroy me. I want more, I said. More what? Everything. Every secret they've ever kept, every law they've ever broken, every person they've ever hurt. That's a big ask. You said you had sources in places most PIs don't. I do. Use them. Cassie packed up her laptop. This is going to get expensive. How expensive? $10,000 cash. And I want a bonus when we're done. How much of a bonus? Depends on how satisfying their destruction turns out to be. I wrote her a check that night for $15,000. Money from an account Lila didn't know existed, funded by consulting work I'd been doing for a defense contractor. Cassie called 2 weeks later. You need to see this, she said. And you need to see it now. Cassie's apartment looked like a FBI field office. 3 computers running simultaneously, printouts covering every flat surface, photographs pinned to whiteboards with red string connecting various pieces of information. Welcome to the war room, she said, leading me inside. Hope you brought coffee because we're going to be here for a while. She'd been busy. Bank records going back 5 years, phone records, email archives, social media forensics, even parking tickets and library checkout records. Your wife and brother aren't just having an affair, Cassie said. They're running a criminal enterprise. She showed me the scope of the student loan fraud. Not just a few applications, hundreds. Over 3 years, they'd stolen nearly $400,000 from the federal education system. Alex identifies vulnerable students, kids from poor families, immigrants, anyone who wouldn't be likely to follow up on paperwork. He creates fake applications using their information, but directs the money to accounts he controls. And Lila? provides the addresses. She's been creating an entire network of fake rental properties, buildings that exist but nobody lives there. Perfect addresses for students who don't exist. The paperwork was staggering. Shell companies, fake leases, fabricated rental agreements. Lila had been using her position as a real estate appraiser to create an alternate reality of properties and tenants. How did they launder the money? Through Alex's wedding expenses. Look at this. She showed me receipts for the upcoming ceremony. $40,000 catering contract, $20,000 flower arrangement, $15,000 wedding cake, all paid for with stolen federal money. Sarah doesn't know? Sarah thinks Alex inherited money from a rich uncle. She's actually innocent in all this. I felt a moment of sympathy for Alex's fiancé. Then I remembered she was about to marry the man who destroyed my life, and the sympathy evaporated. What about my parents? Your father's clean, more than clean. He's been documenting everything from his end. The old man's sharp. She showed me copies of communications between my father and his lawyer. He'd been building a case against Alex for months, waiting for the right moment to act. He's been protecting the family assets, Cassie explained. Moving money into trusts that Alex can't touch, even if he somehow got access to the inheritance. And my mother? Doesn't know anything. Your dad's been handling this alone. What about Madeline? Cassie's expression softened slightly. Your daughter's clean too. But Brent, she's been asking questions about why her mother's been acting strange, about why you've been so distant. Guilt hit me like a physical blow. In my focus on gathering evidence against Lila and Alex, I'd been neglecting the one person in this mess who was truly innocent. She knows something's wrong, Cassie continued. Smart kid. She's been watching, listening. She even asked me about it. Asked you about what? She saw me taking photos outside Alex's house, approached me directly. Wanted to know if her parents were getting divorced. What did you tell her? The truth? That adults sometimes make complicated choices, and sometimes those choices hurt the people they love. I sat down heavily in Cassie's desk chair. The weight of what I was doing, what I was about to do, settled on my shoulders like lead. There's something else, Cassie said quietly, about the pregnancy. What about it? Medical records show Lila had genetic testing done, the kind they do to check for birth defects. And the tests include paternity markers, biological father information. I looked up at her. You're saying she knows for certain whose baby it is? I'm saying she's known from the beginning, and she's been planning to lie about it from the beginning. Cassie handed me a printout. Medical records clearly obtained through illegal means, but damning nonetheless. The baby was Alex's, no question. Lila had been planning to fake a paternity test somehow, or simply rely on timing and my ignorance to carry off the deception. How were they going to fake paternity? They weren't. They were going to get you to take a test that would be switched with Alex's sample. There's a lab technician in Portland who's been taking payments from them. The scope of the conspiracy was breathtaking. Not just infidelity or simple fraud, but a complex criminal operation involving multiple people and years of planning. Why? I asked. Why go to all this trouble? Why not just get divorced and be together honestly? Money, Cassie said simply. Your father's estate is worth more than they could steal in 10 years of student loan fraud, but only if Alex is seen as the stable, married son with a child on the way. And if I found out about the affair? They were going to claim you were abusive, violent, unstable, paint you as the villain who drove your wife into your brother's arms. She showed me draft documents, restraining order applications, false police reports ready to be filed, character assassination materials designed to destroy my reputation and credibility. They were going to destroy you completely, Cassie said. Not just take your wife and steal your family money. They were going to make sure you lost everything, including your security clearance and your job. I stared at the evidence of their planned destruction of my life. Every detail carefully considered, every angle covered. They'd been planning to erase me from existence. What do you want to do? Cassie asked. I looked around the war room at the evidence of their crimes: bank fraud, identity theft, conspiracy, planned perjury, destruction of evidence. Enough to send them both to federal prison for 20 years, but that wasn't enough. Prison was too clean, too simple. I wanted them to feel what I'd felt. The slow realization that everything they thought they knew was a lie. The gradual understanding that they'd been played by someone smarter and more ruthless than they'd imagined. I wanted them to experience betrayal. I want to attend a wedding, I said. St. Mary's Chapel looked like something from a fairy tale. white roses everywhere, silk ribbons in pale blue and ivory, sunlight streaming through stained glass windows, casting rainbow patterns across the polished wooden pews. Alex stood at the altar in his custom tuxedo, nervously adjusting his bow tie. He'd lost weight in the past month, probably from stress. His best man, our cousin from Salem, whispered something that made Alex smile. Sarah looked stunning in her grandmother's wedding dress, a vintage creation that had been altered to fit her perfectly. She carried a bouquet of white orchids in baby's breath, her face glowing with happiness. My parents sat in the front row, my father in his old navy dress uniform, my mother in a blue dress that matched her eyes. They looked proud and emotional, the way parents should look at their son's wedding. Lila sat beside them, elegant in a black cocktail dress that should have been inappropriate for a wedding, but somehow looked perfect on her. She'd styled her hair in an updo that showed off the diamond earrings I'd bought her for our 10th anniversary. She didn't know I was there. I had entered through the side door, used by the altar boys, wearing the black suit I kept for funerals. The chapel was full, maybe 150 people, and I blended into the standing crowd at the back. The ceremony was beautiful, traditional. Sarah's voice shook slightly as she recited her vows, promising to love and honor Alex for the rest of her life. Alex's voice was steady, confident. He promised to forsake all others, to be faithful and true, to love Sarah through sickness and health until death parted them. The lies flowed like honey from his mouth. I waited until the pastor asked if anyone objected to the union. "I do," I said, my voice carrying clearly through the chapel. Every head turned, gasps echoed off the stone walls. Sarah's bouquet trembled in her hands. "I object," I continued, walking down the center aisle, "on the grounds that the groom is already in a committed relationship." Alex's face went white. Lila half stood from her pew, then sat back down hard. I reached the altar and placed a manila envelope on the communion table. "Ladies and gentlemen," I announced, my voice steady despite the chaos I was about to unleash, "I present evidence that Alex Mallory has been conducting an extramarital affair for the past 2 years." I opened the envelope. 8 by 10 photographs spilled across the white linen. Alex and Lila in bed. Alex and Lila in my kitchen. Alex and Lila in hotel rooms I'd tracked them to. Sarah stared at the photos, her face cycling through confusion, recognition, and horror. "These were taken over the past 6 months," I continued. "The woman in the photographs is my wife, Lila Mallory. The man is her lover, my brother Alex." Sarah dropped her bouquet. The white orchids scattered across the altar steps like fallen snow. "Furthermore," I said, my voice growing stronger, "I have evidence that both parties have been committing federal crimes to fund their relationship." I pulled out bank statements showing the stolen student loan money. Alex Mallory has embezzled approximately $400,000 from federal education programs. Lila Mallory has been assisting by providing fraudulent property appraisals. The chapel erupted in chaos. People shouting, standing, some trying to leave. The pastor called for calm, his voice lost in the noise. Alex finally found his voice. "You're insane, Brent. This is some kind of breakdown." "Is it?" I pulled out my phone and connected it to the chapel sound system through the wireless microphone receiver. "Let's listen to a conversation from last Thursday." Alex's voice filled the chapel through the speakers. "Just 6 more weeks, then we can be together properly." Lila's voice followed. "What about the baby?" "Brent will never know. Men are stupid about that stuff. He'll think it's his." Sarah screamed. Actually screamed. A sound of pure anguish that cut through every other noise in the chapel. She turned to Alex, her wedding dress rustling. "Baby? What baby?" Alex opened his mouth, but no words came out. "Lila is 8 weeks pregnant," I announced to the assembled crowd, "with Alex's child. They've been planning to pass it off as mine to secure the family inheritance." My mother stood up from the front pew, her face twisted with rage. "Lila, is this true?" Lila finally found her voice. "It's not what you think. He's been stalking us, recording us illegally. This is maltreatment." "Actually," said a new voice from the back of the chapel, "it's evidence of multiple felonies." Everyone turned to see Detective Ray Morrison of the Portland Police Bureau walking down the aisle with 2 uniformed officers. "Alex Mallory," Detective Morrison said, "you're under arrest for federal fraud, conspiracy, and identity theft." The handcuffs clicked with a sound like breaking glass. Sarah collapsed into the front pew, her wedding dress pooling around her like spilled milk. Her maid of honor, her sister from what I remembered, put protective arms around her. "This is a mistake," Alex said as the officers led him away. Brent's lying. He's unstable. He's been threatening us. Actually, Mr. Mallory, Detective Morrison said, we've been investigating the student loan fraud for 3 months. Your brother's evidence just made our case bulletproof. As they walked Alex past me, he leaned close enough to whisper, "You'll regret this. Both of you will pay." "I already have," I replied. "The question is whether you can afford what you owe." Lila tried to follow them out, but Detective Morrison stopped her. "Lila Mallory, you're also under arrest." The second set of handcuffs sounded like the closing of a tomb. As the police led them both away, I turned to address the remaining guests. "I apologize for disrupting what should have been a celebration," I said. "But I couldn't let Sarah marry a man who was already committed to destroying another family." Sarah looked up at me from the front pew, mascara streaking down her cheeks. "Did you know?" she asked. "Before today, did you know?" "I've known for 2 years," I said. "I've been gathering evidence for 2 years. Why didn't you tell me sooner?" I knelt beside her pew, speaking quietly enough that only she could hear. "Because I needed them to commit to this publicly. I needed them to lie to you, to your family, to God himself. I needed them to prove they were willing to destroy anything and anyone to get what they wanted. Including me? I'm sorry you got hurt, but yes, including you." Sarah stared at me for a long moment. Then she stood up, her wedding dress rustling, and walked out of the chapel with her head held high. My parents approached cautiously. "Son," my father said, "we need to talk." "I know you knew, Dad. I know you've been working your own angle on this." His eyes widened slightly. "How long have you known that I knew?" 3 weeks. My investigator is very thorough." My mother looked between us, confused. "Conrad? What is he talking about?" "Later, Margaret," my father said. "Right now, we need to focus on damage control." "There's no damage to control," I said. "It's over. They're both going to federal prison. The money they stole will be recovered. The family assets are protected." "What about Madeline?" my mother asked. That stopped me cold. In my focus on destroying Lila and Alex, I'd barely considered how this would affect our daughter. "She's at home," I said. "I told her I had to attend a wedding. She doesn't know yet." "She needs to hear this from you," my mother said, "before she sees it on the news." The news? Jesus, this would be everywhere by tonight. Local acoustic engineer exposes wife's affair at brother's wedding. Federal fraud scandal rocks Portland family. My phone buzzed. Text message from an unknown number. "Dad, people are posting videos online." "What's happening?" Madeline had seen it already. I drove home through streets that felt unfamiliar, like I was seeing my own neighborhood for the first time. Everything looked the same, but everything had changed. Madeline was waiting on the front porch when I pulled into the driveway. 17 years old, long brown hair like mine, green eyes like her mother's. She looked older than she had that morning. "Is it true?" she asked before I'd even gotten out of the car. "Which part?" "All of it. The affair, the baby, the money." I sat beside her on the porch steps. "It's true." "How long have you known?" 2 years. She was quiet for a long time, staring at our front yard where she'd played as a child. "Are you and Mom getting divorced?" "Yes." "Will I have to choose sides?" "No. You shouldn't have to choose anything. This is between adults who made terrible choices." "What about the baby?" I looked at my daughter, trying to find words that wouldn't destroy what remained of her childhood. "Your mother made some very bad decisions. She's going to have to face the consequences." "Will she go to jail?" "Probably." Madeline started crying then. Not the dramatic tears of a teenager, but the quiet, heartbroken sobs of someone whose world had just collapsed. I put my arm around her, and we sat on the porch until the sun went down. 6 months later, I sat in a federal courtroom watching my wife and brother plead guilty to conspiracy, fraud, and identity theft. The prosecution had built an airtight case. Cassie's evidence, combined with federal investigators' financial forensics, painted a picture of a criminal operation that had stolen from hundreds of students over 3 years. Lila sat at the defendant's table in a modest blue dress, her pregnancy now visible at 6 months. Her lawyer, a public defender since all her assets had been frozen, whispered urgently in her ear. Alex wore an orange jumpsuit. He'd been denied bail after investigators discovered he'd tried to flee to Canada with $50,000 in cash hidden in his car. The judge was a stern woman in her 60s who'd clearly seen every type of criminal excuse imaginable. "Mr. Mallory," she said, addressing Alex, "you held a position of trust as a school counselor. You used that position to prey on vulnerable students. Stealing money meant to help them escape poverty and build better lives. The court finds your actions particularly heinous." Alex's sentence: 15 years in federal prison, full restitution of stolen funds, lifetime ban from employment and education. Mrs. Mallory, the judge continued, your role in this conspiracy was equally reprehensible. You used your professional credentials to create a network of fraudulent properties, enabling the theft of federal education funds. Lila's sentence: 12 years in federal prison, suspended to 8 years due to her pregnancy, full restitution, lifetime ban from real estate licensing. The baby would be born in prison. After sentencing, I met with Vic Tolan to finalize the divorce proceedings. She's asking for supervised visitation with Madeline, he said, shuffling through legal documents. What do you think? I think Madeline's old enough to decide for herself. She'll be 18 in 6 months anyway. And the baby? Paternity test confirms Alex is the father. Since he's incarcerated and she'll be incarcerated, the state will likely place the child in foster care unless family members step forward. I stared out Vic's office window at the Portland skyline. What kind of family members? Grandparents, aunts, uncles, people with clean records and stable living situations. People like me? Vic looked up from his papers. You want to raise your ex-wife's baby with your brother? I want to make sure an innocent child doesn't suffer for their parents' crimes. That's surprisingly generous considering. I'm full of surprises, but that wasn't the real reason. The real reason was more complicated, more twisted. I wanted to raise that child because it would be the ultimate victory, taking something Lila and Alex had created together and making it mine, proving that I could be a better father to their child than they could ever be. It was revenge disguised as mercy. The house on the Oregon coast was perfect. 3 bedrooms, large windows facing the Pacific, enough land for privacy, but close enough to town for necessities. I'd bought it with money from the settlement of my parents' estate. My father had died of a heart attack 8 months after the trial, the stress of the family scandal finally catching up with him. He'd left everything to me, as promised. The defense contracts, the real estate investments, the patents. Enough money to last several lifetimes if managed properly. I sat on the deck, watching 18-month-old Emma play with wooden blocks on a blanket spread across the weathered boards. She had Alex's dark hair, but Lila's green eyes, and a smile that could break your heart. Madeline was inside, packing for college. She'd chosen Oregon State, my old school, and planned to study psychology. She wanted to understand why people did terrible things to each other. Smart kid, I'd told her, but some questions don't have good answers. Emma looked up at me and babbled something that might have been Dada. I'd been the only father figure she'd ever known. The state had awarded me custody after Lila's parental rights were terminated for criminal conviction. Alex had signed away his rights from prison rather than fight a custody battle he couldn't win. My phone buzzed. Email from Cassie, who now worked as director of security for my consulting company. Target acquired. Portland businessman who testified against us has been experiencing some equipment failures. Nothing traceable. Thought you'd want to know. I deleted the email without responding. Marcus Webb had been one of the federal witnesses who'd testified about Alex and Lila's fraud network. His construction company had been used to create some of the fake addresses in their scheme. Webb had cooperated with prosecutors in exchange for immunity, but I didn't forget people who'd enabled my family's destruction. His construction equipment had been experiencing mysterious hydraulic failures. Computer viruses had corrupted his project files. Permits got lost in bureaucratic delays. Nothing criminal, nothing traceable, just the kind of systematic maltreatment that slowly destroys a business. I'd learned that revenge didn't have to be dramatic. Sometimes it was more satisfying when it was subtle, patient, and absolutely thorough. My phone rang. Unknown number. Hello? Brent? It's Sarah. Alex's ex-fiancée. We hadn't spoken since the wedding day. Sarah, how are you? I'm calling because I heard about your father. I'm sorry for your loss. Thank you. I also heard you're raising the baby. Emma? That's right. That's very kind of you. She's innocent in all this. Yes, she is. A pause. Brent, I need to tell you something about that day at the chapel. What about it? I knew about the affair. I'd known for weeks before the wedding. I stopped rocking Emma's swing. What? Someone sent me photos, anonymous email. I confronted Alex about it, and he convinced me they were faked. Photoshopped. He said you were trying to destroy our relationship because you were jealous of his happiness. Why didn't you call off the wedding? Because I loved him, and I thought love was enough to fix things. I listened to her breathe on the other end of the line. I wanted to thank you, she continued, for stopping me from making the biggest mistake of my life. I was angry at first, but now I understand you saved me. You would have figured it out eventually. Maybe. But by then I would have been married to a criminal, maybe had children with him. You gave me my life back. After she hung up, I sat on the deck watching the sunset paint the Pacific in shades of orange and red. Emma had fallen asleep in her swing, her small fist wrapped around a wooden block. Madeline came outside carrying a suitcase. All packed, she said, sitting beside me. Are you going to be okay, taking care of Emma by yourself? I'll manage. Dad? She used that tone that meant she was about to ask something difficult. Do you ever regret it? What you did to Mom and Uncle Alex? I thought about the question carefully. Did I regret destroying my wife and brother? Did I regret the 2 years I'd spent documenting their betrayal? Did I regret the methodical way I'd crushed everything they'd tried to build? No, I said I don't regret it. Even though Emma will grow up without her real parents? Emma's real parent is whoever raises her with love and stability. Biology doesn't make someone a parent. What if she asks about them someday? Then I'll tell her the truth, that her biological parents made choices that hurt a lot of people, and those choices had consequences. Madeline was quiet for a moment. Do you think you'll ever trust anyone again? I trust you. What about other people? Will you ever get married again? I looked out at the Pacific, where waves crashed against rocks that had stood for millions of years. I don't think I'm the marrying type anymore. Because Mom hurt you. Because I learned something about myself during all this. Something I didn't know before. What? I learned that I'm very good at destroying people who cross me. And that's not the kind of person who should be in a relationship. Madeline stared at me with an expression I couldn't read. That's a lonely way to live, Dad. Maybe, but it's honest. The next morning, I drove Madeline to college. We stood in her dorm room, surrounded by boxes and the nervous energy of incoming freshmen. You'll call if you need anything? I asked. Of course. And you'll come home for holidays? Dad, it's Oregon State, not Mars. I'll be home so often you'll get sick of me. I hugged her goodbye, trying not to think about how empty the house would feel with just Emma and me. On the drive home, my phone rang. Cassie. We have a problem, she said. What kind of problem? Lila's been writing letters from prison to reporters, to federal investigators, to your old colleagues at the Defense Department. What kind of letters? She's claiming you framed her and Alex. Says you falsified evidence, bribed witnesses, and used your government connections to railroad them into prison. I pulled over to the side of the highway. Is anyone taking her seriously? A few people are asking questions. Nothing formal yet, but there's been some informal inquiry into your background investigation methods. What do they want to know? Whether you had legal authority to conduct the surveillance you did. Whether any of the evidence was obtained illegally. Whether you might have planted some of the financial evidence. I sat in my parked car, watching traffic flow past on Highway 101. Can they prove anything? Not with what we did. Everything was legal, if aggressive. But Lila's smart, and she's had 2 years in prison to think about this. She's found some procedural issues that could raise doubts. What kind of procedural issues? Remember that lab technician who was supposed to switch paternity test samples? Lila claims he was an undercover federal agent who entrapped them into attempting fraud. That was news to me. Was he? I don't know. But if he was, and if we didn't know about it, then the paternity fraud evidence might be fruit from a poisoned tree. Meaning? Meaning Lila might be able to appeal her conviction. And if she gets out early, she'll come after you with everything she has. I started the car and pulled back onto the highway. Let her come, I said. Brent, you don't understand. If she can prove you acted illegally in gathering evidence, she might be able to sue you for wrongful prosecution. She could take everything, the house, the business, custody of Emma. She won't. How can you be sure? Because I have insurance. What kind of insurance? The kind that ensures nobody ever believes a word she says. That night, I sat in my study going through files I hadn't opened in 2 years. Evidence I'd gathered, but never used. Secrets I'd discovered, but kept hidden. Lila thought she was smart, writing letters from prison, trying to create doubt about my methods. But she'd forgotten something important about me. I was very, very good at my job. And my job was making sure secrets stayed buried. The reporter was young, ambitious, and stupid. Jennifer Walsh from the Portland Tribune had been calling for weeks, wanting to interview me about Lila's allegations. She'd written 3 articles already, questioning the evidence that had sent my wife and brother to prison. I finally agreed to meet her. We sat in a coffee shop downtown, the kind of place where journalists like to think they were uncovering important stories. She had a digital recorder on the table between us and a notebook filled with questions. "Mr. Mallory," she began, "your ex-wife claims you falsified evidence against her and your brother. What's your response?" "My response is that desperate people say desperate things. But some of her claims seem credible. She says you had no legal authority to conduct surveillance on private citizens." "I was conducting surveillance on my own wife, in my own home. That's not only legal, it's my right as a property owner." "What about financial records?" She claims you hacked into bank accounts." "I hired a licensed private investigator who used legal methods to obtain public financial information." Jennifer consulted her notes. "That investigator, Cassie Brandt, has an interesting background. Former military intelligence, discharged under circumstances that remain classified." I sipped my coffee calmly. "What's your point?" "My point is that Ms. Brandt has connections to agencies that might have provided her with access to information ordinary private investigators couldn't obtain." "Are you suggesting federal agents helped me spy on my wife?" "I'm suggesting the evidence against your ex-wife and brother was gathered using methods that might not have been entirely legal." I set down my coffee cup and looked directly at Jennifer. "Ms. Walsh, how long have you been a reporter?" 3 years. "And in those 3 years, how many federal fraud cases have you covered?" "This is my first major investigation." "I see. Well, let me give you some free advice about investigating federal cases." I pulled out my phone and showed her a photograph. "This is Lila and Alex, taken 6 months before their arrest, meeting with Vincent Carrera. Do you know who Vincent Carrera is?" Jennifer looked at the photo, then shook her head. "Vincent Carrera is a money launderer for organized crime families in Seattle. He specializes in making dirty money look like legitimate income through fake businesses and fraudulent loan applications." Her eyes widened. The student loan fraud wasn't just a scheme to steal education money. It was a money laundering operation. Lila and Alex were washing pill money through the federal education system. "How do you know this?" "Because federal agents have been investigating Carrera for 5 years. My ex-wife and brother weren't sufferers of overzealous prosecution. They were small fish who got caught in a net meant for much bigger criminals." I showed her more photographs, bank records, surveillance footage of meetings I'd never mentioned during the trial. "Why wasn't this presented as evidence?" she asked. "Because revealing it would have compromised an ongoing federal investigation into organized crime. The prosecution had enough evidence to convict them on the education fraud alone." "Are you saying your ex-wife was involved with organized crime?" "I'm saying she and my brother were useful idiots who thought they were clever criminals. They had no idea they were being used by professionals." Jennifer's recorder was still running, capturing every word. "This is all off the record, isn't it?" she asked. "Nothing's off the record, Ms. Walsh. You wanted the truth about Lila's allegations. This is the truth. Do you have proof of these organized crime connections?" "I have enough proof to destroy what's left of Lila's credibility if she keeps making accusations against me." I stood up, leaving a $20 bill on the table. "One more thing, Ms. Walsh. Before you write your story, you might want to research Vincent Carrera's associates, particularly what happens to people who interfere with federal investigations into money laundering." "Is that a threat?" "It's friendly advice from someone who knows how this game is really played." I walked out of the coffee shop, leaving Jennifer staring at the photographs spread across our table. The next day, her editor killed the story. The day after that, Lila's lawyer stopped returning her calls. By the end of the week, the federal investigators who'd been asking questions about my methods had quietly closed their inquiry. I never heard from Jennifer Walsh again. That weekend, I received a letter from Lila, handwritten on prison stationery, mailed to my business address. "Brent, I know what you did. Not just to Alex and me, but to that reporter. You're not the man I married. You've become something cold and calculating and cruel. I want you to know that I'm dropping all appeals. I'm not going to fight the conviction anymore. Not because I'm guilty of everything they accuse me of, but because I'm tired of fighting a man who's willing to destroy anyone who gets in his way. Emma is better off with you than she would be with me. I see that now. You'll protect her in ways I never could, even if you do it through fear and intimidation. But someday, she's going to ask questions about her real parents. And when she does, I hope you'll remember that we weren't always monsters. We were people who made terrible choices, but we were still people. I won't contact you again. Lila." I read the letter twice, then fed it into my office shredder. Emma was napping in her crib when I got home. I stood in the doorway of her nursery watching her sleep, thinking about the letter. Lila was right about one thing. I'd become something cold and calculating. But she was wrong about something else. I'd always been this way. The betrayal hadn't changed me. It had revealed me. The man who'd married her 23 years ago had been weak, trusting, naive. He'd believed in love and family and the basic goodness of people. That man was dead. The man who'd raised Emma, who'd built a successful business, who'd destroyed anyone who threatened his interests, that man was the real me. And I was perfectly comfortable with who I'd become. My phone buzzed. Text message from Madeline. "Dad, can you pick me up for Thanksgiving? My roommate's car broke down." I typed back, "Of course. See you Wednesday." Outside, the Pacific waves crashed against the rocks below my house, same as they had for millions of years. Constant, relentless, indifferent to the small human dramas playing out on the shore. I'd learned to be like those waves, steady, predictable, unstoppable. Emma stirred in her crib, making the small sounds babies make when they're dreaming. In her sleep, she smiled. She would grow up safe, protected, loved. She would never know the chaos her biological parents had created. She would never experience the kind of betrayal that had torn my life apart. I would make sure of it. Because that's what fathers do. They protect their children from monsters, even when the monster is themselves. 2 years later, I stood in my study reading a newspaper article about Alex's passing in federal prison, stabbed by another inmate during a fight over contraband cigarettes. The article was brief, clinical. It mentioned his conviction for fraud, but nothing about the wider conspiracy. Nothing about organized crime connections or money laundering. Just another criminal who died in prison. I folded the newspaper and placed it in my desk drawer next to Lila's letter and other documents I'd never shared with anyone. Emma was 4 now, bright and curious and completely innocent. She called me Daddy and had no memory of anyone else ever caring for her. Madeline was graduating college in the spring, engaged to a young man who treated her with respect and kindness. She'd learned from her parents' mistakes. My business was thriving. Cassie had expanded our operations beyond private investigation into corporate security, background investigations, and what we euphemistically called reputation management. We'd become very successful at helping people solve problems that couldn't be solved through conventional means. My life was exactly what I'd built it to be. Ordered, controlled, protected. But sometimes, late at night when the house was quiet and Emma was sleeping, I would stand on my deck looking out at the Pacific and wonder if I'd won or lost. I'd destroyed my enemies completely. I'd protected my family. I'd built something new from the ashes of what they'd tried to take from me. But I'd also lost the ability to trust anyone completely, to love without reservation, to believe that people were fundamentally good. Lila had been right about that. I'd become something cold and calculating. The question was whether that was evolution or corruption, whether I'd become the man I needed to be or the man I never should have been. The waves crashed against the rocks below, offering no answers, just the endless rhythm of tides that had been flowing long before I was born and would continue long after I was gone. Constant, relentless, indifferent, perfect. 5 years later. The DNA test results lay on my desk like a loaded tool. Emma sat in her bedroom, 9 years old now, working on homework. She'd asked the question 3 weeks ago, the one I'd been dreading since the day I'd gained custody. "Daddy, why don't I look like you or Madeline?" Smart kid. Too smart for her own good. I'd stalled, deflected, changed the subject, but Emma was persistent, like her biological father had been. She kept asking until I finally agreed to find out together. The test confirmed what I'd always known. No genetic relationship between Emma and me whatsoever. But it also revealed something I hadn't expected. Emma wasn't Alex's biological daughter either. I stared at the results, reading them for the 10th time. The lab had been thorough, testing DNA from multiple family members to establish paternity. Emma's biological father was Vincent Carrera, the money launderer, the organized crime associate, the man whose photograph I'd shown to journalist Jennifer Walsh 5 years ago. Lila hadn't just been washing pill money through fake student loans. She'd been having an affair with the money launderer himself. My wife had been sleeping with 3 men, me, my brother, and a criminal. And the child I'd been raising as my own was the daughter of a man who'd probably eliminated people. I picked up my secure phone and called Cassie. I need a deep background investigation, I said when she answered. On who? Vincent Carrera, everything. Family, associates, current location, financial status. The money launderer from the Lila case? Why? Because he's Emma's biological father. Silence on the other end. Jesus, Brent, how did you find out? DNA test. Emma's been asking questions. What do you want to do? I looked toward Emma's bedroom where I could hear her humming while she worked on math problems. I want to know if he's a threat. To Emma? To our family. Cassie was quiet for a moment. And if he is a threat, then we eliminate the threat. Brent, find him, Cassie. Find everything about him. And find it fast. I hung up and walked to Emma's bedroom. She was sprawled on her stomach on the carpet, colored pencils scattered around her, working on a science project about ocean ecosystems. How's the homework going, sweetheart? Good. Did you know some fish can change their gender when they need to survive? No, I didn't know that. It's called sequential hermaphroditism. They adapt to their environment. She looked up at me with those green eyes that look so much like Lila's. I think that's really smart, being able to change when you need to. Very smart, I agreed. That night, after Emma was asleep, I sat in my study staring at the DNA results. Emma wasn't my biological daughter. She wasn't Alex's daughter. She was the daughter of a criminal who might one day decide he wanted to claim her. Or worse, who might decide she was a liability. I'd spent 5 years building a life around protecting this child, believing she was the innocent product of my brother's betrayal. But she wasn't innocent at all. She was evidence of something much darker. Evidence that Lila's criminal activities had gone far deeper than anyone had ever imagined. Evidence that might get Emma eliminated if the wrong people discovered it. I opened my laptop and began typing an encrypted message to Cassie. Priority 1 investigation. Vincent Carrera, age 52, last known address Seattle. Financial records, criminal associates, current activities. Also investigate all connections to Lila Mallory during 2019-2021. Timeline, 72 hours maximum. Authorization level, whatever it takes. I sent the message and closed the laptop. Tomorrow, I would start planning how to handle the biggest threat my family had ever faced. Tonight, I would sit in my study and listen to the Pacific waves crash against the rocks below, steady and relentless and perfect. Some fish change gender to survive in hostile environments. Some men change everything about themselves. I'd evolved once before when I'd discovered Lila's betrayal. Now I would evolve again, into something capable of protecting Emma from monsters I hadn't even known existed, into something that would make my previous self look tame by comparison. The waves crashed below, offering their eternal rhythm. And I smiled, because I just realized something that changed everything. I wasn't the sufferer in this story anymore. I wasn't even the hero. I was the thing other monsters feared in the dark, and I was just getting started.